Good afternoon. It's Sunday. I'm out a little earlier. It's hot. It's in the mid to upper 80s. I don't hear nor feel any wind at all. I've been trying to think about the tragic flaws that Shakespeare would dwell upon in our American tragedy. I guess we would call it brute Trump continues to try to steal an election he lost and stay out of jail. I was once at a trial, and I was a prosecutor at the time, and the defense attorney asked my cooperating witness a question on the stand about didn't he see himself in headlines, and he went on a little bit. And I objected. And the judge said, "Why did you object?" I said, "Your Honor, it's too long for a headline." Everybody laughed, including the defense attorney and his client. So what I just said is too long a headline. But in terms of Shakespearean shortcomings, which either are overcome by the protagonist, and that's defined as a comedy, not a happy ending, not kind of slapstick, the strict Aristotelian sense of what a comedy is. Now, what's a tragedy? Well, a tragedy can happen several times, several different ways, but for Aristotle, it was when that basic flaw in character brought them down. So, Othello is terribly jealous and trusts whom he thought was a friend and turns against the wife he loved. What do you do there? King Lear, he sits in a room, and the one daughter who's faithful to him, that's the one he questions and is suspicious of the most. But what Shakespearean drama fits most what we're dealing with here? And at first glance, we might think there isn't one, but there is. And one of the reasons I don't think we think of it is because it's sold to us as kids in a certain way. I'm talking about Julius Caesar. Beware the Ides of March. Something's coming. And the suspense of what's going to happen to Caesar, well, after the first time you see it, there's not that suspense, but then it's a question of art and how it's presented. But you say to yourself, oh my God, they killed Caesar. That's terrible. And that's the way we thought about it, I think, most of us in grammar school. And even by high school, you're reading Julius Caesar. And what is it? They're killing a dictator. They're stabbing a dictator. And even his friend, who's probably advised him beforehand, Brutus, he says, "Et tu, Brute?" And Brutus stabs him once to be part of the pact, if you will. So is Trump Caesar? Well, the other part of Caesar, which is what I think is handed down to us, is the notion of what a powerful general he was and a man who wrote about it. And when the Jesuits teach you about Julius Caesar, you read his famous Gallic Wars, in part because it's simpler Latin, sparse, it's easier to follow and understand, although not at first. Omnis Gallus in tres partes divisa est. Whole Gaul is divided into three parts. So you remember certain things from Latin. And that's what he was, a great general. But what is Trump? What is his flaw? Has he crossed the Rubicon, which symbolically for Caesar was crossing a river with troops? He didn't just cross it. And that was considered an act of war. And that was considered more than too much. It's like our fear of standing armies when we began as a republic. So he came in arms and was the emperor. And so the fight after that was, once they repressed the revolutionaries, was who would be in charge. as the new dictator. So, do we want that second part? No, I don't think so. Now, what does that have to do with where we are today? I think it's an interesting thing to look at because so many people think of Trump like Caesar as some kind of conquering hero. Well, Caesar certainly risked his life and did quite a number of things that are feats of a military man that are hard to match. So those comparisons, except by magical shifts in thinking, don't get us anywhere near a guy like Trump, who dodged class at Fordham, ended up at a military academy, sort of faked his credentials his whole life, and he's a misfit from Flushing, Queens, who never really had any special skills except to extort and scheme and bribe and steal and misrepresent and lie in ways that most of us would never think to do. For most of us, we couldn't live with ourselves. And then there's a portion of which, and I've represented some of them, I tell them they're not meant to be criminals. They act suspect. They can't get away with crime. They shouldn't do it. Not that I ever advise anybody to do crime, but there are people that just are going to be caught. And Trump fits in that category. He's been caught. In fact, you didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to catch him, because he did it out there in plain view because of his eternal, unquenchable arrogance. But this week's a different kind of week. A couple of things going on that I think are worth thinking about. And as I'm saying this, I don't know what I'm going to say next, because I haven't had a chance to think about this. I usually don't. And my flavor for these walk and talks is things that caught my attention sometime during the day before I do them. So, but this week stands out. There are a bunch of things going on. Now, first, let's talk about what didn't happen, or isn't going to happen. Tomorrow, Trump was going to tell us why Georgia was all wrong. That's not happening. Wednesday, I'm 98.7% certain, is when the Republicans are all going to gather on a stage, save one perhaps, and talk about who should be the nominee of the Republican Party. Now, I'm listening to Talking Heads today, and they're saying, there are good times when we had two parties. Well, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'd be more comfortable if we had truth as a measure. Not that people, if not under oath, could lie, especially candidates who do. So I'm kind of big on people telling me the truth, and when I catch them in a lie as a public figure, I'm not interested in them being a public figure anymore, not holding elective office. And I listened to the Talking Heads this Sunday, and it says, maybe they have a chance if Trump doesn't show up this Wednesday. They, the other Republican candidates, have a chance to cut away and give cause to their candidacy. Why are we saying such a thing? Do we believe it? Let's analyze this. And that's the trouble. We don't dig down to the second and third layers. So if I was still playing chess, I'd like to play these guys and gals who in a single instant say, there's a chance they could understand. These people, it's not a question of understanding. First of all of them, save one candidate, Christie, as far as I can tell, really, has been persistent, consistent, attacking Trump. And I don't know, he was at 1% the last time I checked. And the others don't really attack him. They sort of occasionally, you think they're going to do a sucker punch, but they don't do it. Because they're afraid of losing the wackos, the maggots that support Trump. Even so, they want Trump to disappear from the field so they can, and this is the part that I don't understand, why we would be cheering on people who hold every other position that Trump holds, probably even how they would take over the government, how they would use the Electoral College, what they would say about Name it. Birth control, the environment, individual rights and liberties. Name it. They're nowhere for any issue that matters to any voter in America. And yes, there are some that would exalt discrimination over having a better candidate than Trump or one of these mini-me's that's running to be Trump but not Trump to be elected. And the campaign people are saying things that come from traditional politics like, they're never going to do anything on election day. These people are going to turn it. You don't know that. And the reason you don't know it is because America has never failed so poorly in its history not to enforce the law. The closest, I suppose, to disaster was how we handled Nixon. We should have prosecuted him. And I can see how at the time people thought otherwise, but that's what we should have done. And we didn't do it, and if we had, we might have been more careful. And when we had crazies come forward, it wasn't enough to beat Goldwater. It wasn't enough to allow Reagan to get away with Iran-Contra. It wasn't enough to let Bush Sr. get away with the first Mishigas in the Middle East. And it wasn't great when Bush, waged a war based on a fear, weapons of mass destruction, that didn't exist or have any place in the public argument. And I was proud for Ted Kennedy, who voted against it. And there were others who did as well. But some voted for it, even as Powell, who was considered, a terrific public figure, went to the UN and lied. He either knew it or he didn't know it, should have known better. And that's when he failed his possible legacy. Another guy from the South Bronx who had carefully woven together a public character that was mostly unassailable, and I'm thinking only of minor things, until this. And he gave good advice at the same time that he was used. His advice was, if you break it, you own it. And we did. And a lot of people died for no good reason. And we didn't get the people for ages who had anything to do with 9/11. So, Wednesday, they're on the stage. Get some popcorn, Coca-Cola, and laugh at how miserably they offer their vision of America. And their vision is myopic and arrogant and personal and self-dealing. All the things Trump is without them saying Trump's a bad guy. How can America follow these people? There is no Republican in America because of this mark of the devil who should be supported in any office. Why build the justice of the peace into a person who gets on the school board, who gets into the state legislature, who becomes a congressman, a senator, a governor, a presidential candidate? Cut off their political careers in the crib where they should be cut off. So, now there's more coming up this week. This week, by Friday, Trump has to appear in Georgia. And I hope they remain true to the hints that we're getting. Fingerprinted, yes. Mugshot, yes. Perp walk, there may be a legitimate security question about that. Directions from the judge in court about the conditions of parole. Will he be held in custody? And since it's only another short turn around the corner, on the 28th, we have an appearance before Judge Chutkan in D.C. for Trump. And this is after his threats to her and to others, and after people have suffered, particularly down in Georgia, and after the FBI, can't find his hindquarters with both hands, is investigating the matter. And those of you who support FBI, don't do it. They fail. They failed most of their career. In fact, if you were to take the highlights of their career, the FBI mostly is responsible for compromising rights and liberties of those people who challenge the government. And yes, I carry this over from the 60s, but I haven't seen any great deviance in that period of time, except the actions of Bobby Kennedy, who I think remains the best Attorney General we've had in my lifetime. So, now, what else is going on that you might be curious about? Well, you heard that the Russians were going to send a rocket ship to the moon. They did, and it was going to go to the South Pole on the moon. And it kind of did. It crashed on the moon surface. It was uncontrolled, and it crashed. So, when we go around saying, we got a man to the moon, I guess they can still only say, we got a crashed ship on the moon. We'll do better next time. I think it's a kick that the bad weather system off Mexico is named Hillary. Kind of gives us a reminder of her prescience in describing who Trump was, who he'd become, and what he would do, all of which was true. And I was a supporter of hers. Went to the convention as her delegate. There's also fires in Western Canada, and F-16s are finally going to Ukraine, and they're coming from Denmark and the Netherlands, and I think that's important. So, how is the state of our nation? I think it's scattered. I think it's tending toward recovery, but it's gathering its strength to do what it must, and for some it's still in doubt that they'll do it. People can talk themselves into doing nothing. Have you done your homework yet? It starts at a young age. But there are more people who care, who have the ability to make a difference, and we're in a different place than we were a month ago, and I think in the fall we'll be in an even stronger place. If Trump continues to do his nonsense, for example, getting together with Fox's ace broadcaster rather than going to the debate Wednesday, with Tucker, I hate you, Trump Carlson. It's a parade. My wife Holly had a bumper strip you may have seen, not on her car but elsewhere, and it was, elect a clown, expect the circus. I saw a guy walk by her car once and he read it apparently, and he started laughing. That's what we do, we laugh at clowns. But this one we put in jail, this one we put away. This one we take all his friends and we put them in cells next to him. We invite the Secret Service to get a little house near the prison system so that Trump can spend his time. And they can pull short straws from those people who were with him on January the 6th to fulfill this assignment. So that's all I got. It's nice talking to you. And I say goodbye to you from my cathedral of trees. Bye-bye.